and welcome to Business Success in a Virtual World podcast, a resource of information for businesses to understand and embrace the innovative power of XR, VR, and AR. Each episode, we attempt to summarize what's new in this growing industry and highlight actual case studies of how these technologies are advancing success in business and enterprise. I'm Tim Beharon, Chairman of Creative Strategies, and each episode I'm joined by Barton Goldenberg, President of ISM Inc. Together, we help our listeners navigate the ever-growing mountain of information and technologies impacting virtual worlds, the metaverse, augmented reality, spatial computing, etc. In addition to all the information presented in each episode, additional information can be found on our resource website, in which you'll discover news, products, and most significantly, over 175 actual case studies of businesses utilizing these inventive technologies. That website is found at www.ismguide.com. The XR Metaverse resource link is on that site. There you'll discover field service examples, training, customer service, manufacturing, and much, much more. It's a fast-growing and complex area destined to impact your business. Let us help you figure out the best strategies. Now, on to the next episode. Thank you for joining us again this week. This particular podcast is fascinating in that we're going to preview what Nike is doing already in the metaverse. Barton, I'll turn it to you, and then we'll have some discussion as a part of it, because they are extremely aggressive, both in the context of using VR technology and going into the metaverse, but they're doing some other things that are really interesting that's already made them significant money. Tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. This is one of the more interesting case studies or use cases in our podcast series. So most, if not all, people know Nike. It's headquartered near Beaverton, Oregon. It's the world's leading designer, marketer, distributor of authentic athletic footwear, apparel, equipment, and accessories for a wide variety of sports and fitness activities. In 2023, and their fiscal year ended in May, Nike operated more than 1,000 stores, Nike towns and Nike stores, generated more than $50 billion in annual revenue, $51.2 billion to be exact, and employed 83,700 workers worldwide. Bill Bowerman and Phil Knight founded Nike back in 1964. Phil Knight ran track for his former track coach, Bill Bowerman, at the University of Oregon. Each of them, Bill and Phil, put up $500 to start something called Blue Ribbon Sports, which eventually became Nike in 1971. And for those that are interested, the company takes its name from Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. Now, one thing that's always impressed me is in 1964, Bill Bowerman said, "If you have a body, you're an athlete." And while Nike makes products for all ages, their real core customer or consumer is 15 to 40 years old, with a particular focus on millennials and Gen Z buyers. Nike's been a customer of mine for a long time. It's one of my favorite customers. I've always been fascinated with their history, with the quality of the people that actually work for Nike, their just do it business mentality, with the understanding that failure is an acceptable part of moving forward, and the stunning beauty of their Beaverton, Oregon headquarters. Absolutely gorgeous. If you've not yet read Phil Knight's passionate memoir titled Shoe Dog, I strongly recommend you do. Phil tells the story of the company and how he created it with Bill, but then some of the struggles he had in growing the company and challenges and working overseas. And it's just a wonderful book, and I strongly recommend you read it. Now, technology has always been a driving force at Nike. For the past decade, for example, Nike's been very keen on artificial intelligence, e-commerce, in-store experimental technology as an integral part of their overall brand strategy. Already in 2020, which is almost 4 years ago now, Nike started filing various patents for downloadable virtual goods, computer programming featuring footwear, clothing, headwear, eyewear, bags for use online, and online virtual worlds. And then starting in 2021, Nike moved into the metaverse full throttle. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So the first big thing they did in 2021 was the creation of something called Nike Land, which is their immersive world. So in an effort to continue technological leadership and remain culturally relevant to the millennial and Gen Z buyers, they developed this Nike Land immersive world. It's a micro metaverse built within the Roblox ecosystem. And most of you know Roblox as one of the first official metaverse platforms designed to empower creators, bring users together in a virtual space, and deliver uniquely immersive experiences. Nike Land is intended to be an engaging 3D space targeted at Nike customers enthusiastic about sports and gaming. The virtual environment is inspired by the original Nike headquarters out in Beaverton, Oregon, so it makes it even more beautiful and interesting to be a part of. And it provides users with a unique range of experiences to enjoy. For example, they can try on virtual products with their avatars, including the latest Nike Air Force One drops. They can buy NFTs. They can take part in mini games for a chance to earn rewards and prizes. Perhaps one of the more compelling parts of Nike Land is the digital showroom, where users can buy any type of garment and even create their own Nike branded accessory from scratch. And that's something that's been in the cards for a number of years. Already the company's hosted a number of major events on the Nike Land platform. Even LeBron James visited the space during the NBA All-Star Week to help inspire and engage users. Nike's now views Nike Land as a strategic initiative that will allow Nike to continue with its community, which is why they continue to add major competitive events to Nike Land, including what might be events such as the Olympics or the World Cup. They're also experimenting with hybrid experiences which connect the real world to its virtual environment. To date, Nike's had 31.5 million visitors from more than 200 countries visiting Nike Land, confirming Nike has been massively successful in its metaverse entry strategy. So, Tim, they have this platform that they can now built on Roblox with millions of users actively involved, lots of fun. That was their first effort. Then later on in 2021, Nike moves into what is Web3, blockchain, and NFTs. So Nike also quickly capitalized on the trend of Web3 and NFT, as you know, is called non-fungible tokens. Now, the NFTs are tokens that live on the blockchain, can be used to create digital assets that are unique and one of a kind. And in December 2021, to solidify their entry into this Web3 and NFTs, Nike purchased a company called RTFKT Studios, and they were makers of next generation NFT collectibles. It's not hard to understand why Nike was so attracted to RTFKT, because that studio sold 600 pairs of NFT sneakers in just 6 minutes for a total of $3.1 million. Now, we may not think about this all the time, but the NFT market for sneakers and other apparel is booming. So Nike's first collection of NFT sneakers, created obviously in conjunction with RTFKT Studios, is called Crypto Kicks. And these digital shoes are available as NFTs that you can easily trade or sell. The Crypto Kicks uses the brand classic Dunk silhouette and are fully customizable with 8 RTFK skins, which allow customers to modify the shoe with unique styles and themes. According to a teaser released recently by RTKFT, the physical shoes technology will soon allow for auto lacing, haptic feedback, and walk recognition. And these elements imply that Nike's working on a method to integrate the sneaker with both video games and Nike applications. To put Nike's wildly successful move into Web3 and NFTs into perspective, I went back and looked at the largest sellers of NFTs in today's virtual world. And in 2022, Nike was number one in terms of NFT revenue with $185 million. This was 7 times larger than the number two, which was Dolce & Gabbana NFT revenue of 25 million. So Nike number one at 185 million, number two in at 25 million. For me, anyhow, Nike's moved into Web3 and NFTs is another indication that Nike clearly understands its millennial and Gen Z buyers, many of whom value unique, one-of-a-kind or customized items over the identical mass-produced goods. The Nike Metaverse collection extends beyond sneakers in the metaverse. As an example, Nike and RTFKT Studios have teamed up to produce a one-of-a-kind football-verse jersey. I'm going to say that again, football-verse jersey. Now, it's accessible both digitally and physically. That's the breakthrough. The actual jersey has a unique feature. It contains an NFC or near-field communication chip. You can attach this chip to your NFT to connect both your digital and physical assets. So this football-verse jersey has the NFC chip in and connects to your NFT digitally. The NFC chip in the jersey adds a intriguing new layer to NFTs, linking the digital asset to material goods. It heralds a new and exciting age in digital and physical products. And the metaverse, Meta and the football-verse jersey line exemplifies how NFTs can now connect virtual and real worlds, empowering customers to a new level of control over their possessions, whether they be physical or digital. The last thing I want to talk about is the Nike experimental stores, where they're integrating now physical and digital as a part of their overall brand strategy. So in addition to these immersive offerings, Nike is also trying new ways to drive brand loyalty. And as you might expect, the New York flagship store and some of the larger city stores, Nike's encouraging visitors to engage with and experiment the brand through not just immersive, but actual sports and technology. So for example, in New York, you can shoot hoops on the in-store basketball court. It has cameras and video screens to capture and provide highlights in real time of how you're playing and how you're shooting. Or visitors can work up a sweat on a treadmill that stimulates running in the great outdoors in a rather unique setting. And then visitors can at the same time customize shoes in the stores to look however they like before buying them and get advice from trainers and coaches who are always on hand about the shoe, its fit, etc. So Nike is hoping that these experimental stores will create a memorable shopping and leisure experience for Gen Zs and millennials that will build a stronger bond between the Nike brand and their customers, whether that customer is in the virtual world or in the real world. So where's Nike Metaverse headed? And I'll just close with a couple of thoughts. Activity-based NFTs. So again, an NFT is something that you buy. It's a unique, one of a kind. It sits in the blockchain. You own it. It has its own value. But an activity-based NFT, Nike might create this to improve the NFT as people walk around and use it. So users, for example, might begin with a simple avatar, then build out and tone their virtual self by utilizing Nike suites of physical applications. The avatar might become more fit and more defined by putting repetitions on at a gym or breaking a personal record on a run. And then Nike-sponsored events might include personal products for avatars and virtual awards for finishing Nike events like these races. Another thing that Nike's looking at, and they've always been very good at this, is enhanced loyalty programs. So they've consistently been improving their digital app ecosystem to reward and motivate athletes to keep active They've been providing rewards to individuals that reach certain distances or attendance criteria. They give them discounts or unique products. And this whole rewards-based strategy helps Nike to generate greater engagements with their users. And it's, again, can be done in the metaverse and in a very effective manner. And the last thing that I think Nike might be looking at is this whole concept of collaboration, and in this case, deeper collaboration with influencers. So Nike's had a very long history of successful partnerships with athletes. If you go out to Nike's headquarters in Beaverton, the buildings are named after key athletes, and the athlete, there's walls and walls of athletes that are sponsors with Nike. Amongst the first business to really invite players like Michael Jordan to early design meetings to help shape the style and features of the famous shoe. And I read last night that Michael Jordan's earned, I think it was $16.5 billion from that sponsorship. Nike's more recent partnership with celebrities like Jeff Staple on the Pigeon Dunk sneaker was a significant cultural milestone. And with these successful influencer collaborations in mind, I'm thinking Nike might expand their metaverse relationships by selling special virtual items made by prominent athletes and influencers. And then Nike can sell these virtual items to the followers of the influencers by giving current shoe design a new look and a personal influencer tale. Let me close with a couple of thoughts. One of the things around Nike campus that's important is not just the just do it, which is a kind of a mentality of how they run their company, but also the concept of raising the bar. And I remember having lunch, this a few years back, with Phil Knight, one of the founders of Nike, and a handful of his direct reports at one of the Beaverton campus's restaurants. The luncheon discussion focused on the importance of applying leading edge technologies to drive sales, enhance marketing, and improve customer service. And I remember distinctly Phil talking about the need to consistently leverage leading edge technologies to raise the bar at Nike. The goal was to stay one step ahead of the competition while deepening Nike's customer experience and engagements with their loyal customers. I've never forgotten this luncheon discussion, Tim, which is why it doesn't surprise me to see Nike crushing the competition in the metaverse. And Nike, in fact, has been more successful than most other big brands in its transition to the metaverse because it's committed to the trend early on. It's leveraged its very well-known brand identity to tap into a multi-billion-dollar market. And it's partnered with critical technology experts like Roblox and others in the metaverse to develop top-quality virtual experiences. While Nike doesn't disclose revenue from the metaverse initiatives, Nike Digital, which is the division that includes the company's Web3 ventures, currently brings in about 26% of Nike's total revenues. Not bad for a company whose co-founder, Phil Knight, initially sold Nike shoes out of the trunk of his car in a parking lot during high school track meets. Back to you, Tim.
The Nike story and Phil Knight in general is a fascinating story. And one thing in this overview of Nike that strikes me, first of all, the leadership position in sports that Nike has taken across the board. The idea, first of all, of linking up with Michael Jordan and then with Tiger Woods and others as a part of a face of a Nike, and then building actual businesses around each of these individuals. And the other thing that strikes me is it's actually coming a little bit about what you said about your lunch with Phil Knight, where he understood very early the importance and the role of technology to create a competitive position for them. And clearly, when the concept of virtual reality began really cropping up way before Zuckerberg started the metaverse craze, they were already taking a hard look at this. And as we have said and showed over the last couple of months during these podcasts, like Pfizer and others were actually starting to look at doing things in the virtual worlds as early as 2017, 2018. But what is striking to me is that Nike has actually put their money where their mouth is. They didn't just think about it. They actually started putting investments in it. And the Roblox example is a really good one because it gave them their target audience a portal to come into a virtual world and then to expand. And I suspect that what happened just from the early 2021, I guess it was, when this Roblox partnership started, that they began to learn a lot about the interests and needs. And this strikes me as a very important part of the thinking of any of these companies. They've got to jump in now and start building not only a case study, but an actual prototype of it to start learning and getting it in. And we, in our industry, we use the term beta version, but beta versions in front of real customers, because they're going to use that as learning. And I'm thinking about this now in the context that in the last 2 to 3 years, with what Nike's already done, can you imagine what they can probably do with what Apple's going to deliver in the Vision Pro, where they can make those experiences even more virtual with interactions and potentially get away from just avatars to some degree, but bring in the actual, the Michael Jordans or the other partners that they have for actual interactive face-to-face discussions from a library, of commentary. It just strikes me that what you're seeing with Nike is a leadership position that's both envious and groundbreaking. And it's one case study in general that a lot of the companies need to be looking at. But what my takeaway from it is that they got in early, started building a foundation, and in the process began to learn, so that by the time now the technology is getting much more advanced and more capabilities, as we're going to see from what Apple releases early next year, and we see from the demos that they've had, you're going to have a completely different world for the millennials and the Gen Zs. And this is the other thing that I think, Barton, we need to take from this. That age group for what Nike's aiming at, 15 to 40, I actually think is the giant age group. That's the big sector that everybody in business is going to have to look at going forward. Because that millennial group, or the under 40s and the 40 or so, and then the Gen Zs coming up, they fundamentally today are a digital generation, but they're going to be a virtual generation. And that virtual generation is actually started to kick off. And even though most of the stuff we've seen in virtual has been relatively early, you can see from what Apple has introduced with the Vision Pro that is going to take a big leap next year. And as a result, it's going to drive the VR market into every business sector in the future.
Yeah, let me pick up on a couple of points. I mean, you've made some great ones. I think some things that stuck out to me was this: you felt that Nike was, what they've accomplished, both envious and groundbreaking. It's envious in that, seriously, the Adidases and the Pumas and some of the bigger competitors have been a whole lot less ready to do it. And that's that just do it mentality of Nike, where they will just do it, try and find their way. But as you've alluded to, any company that is not willing to jump in now into a virtual world really risks being taken over by the competition, either existing or entirely new. The groundbreaking is not at all abnormal at Nike. It happens all the time, whether it's the products or the buildings or the segments or the campaigns, Nike is always trying the latest and greatest groundbreaking thinking. And it reminds me, you mentioned about the segments. You see, Nike is not just in the footwear and apparel business. I worked with them years ago on consumer profile modeling and segmentation. And we broke the market, I remember, into 6 segments. And they were not all sports segments. So at that time, we were trying to figure out how do you align the segment with the distribution channel? So what type of store will a segment most want to buy from? That was the thinking. But I remember distinctly there were performers, and those were people that ran, triathlons and were very active, a type of a sports person. And for them, they really cared about the quality of the product. That was the most important, and help within the store to help make sure they got the exact right shoe and so forth. So that was a sports segment. We had competitors who were, really quite keen to make sure that they played on a consistent basis every Sunday. They'd go out to their local football pitch and play soccer or something, whatever it may be. And then you had the participants. If it rained on Sunday, they didn't go to football. They stayed home and watched the movies, but they were still wanting to be sports types. That was the three Nike sports groups. But then there were three totally active lifestyle groups that almost had nothing to do with sports. Sports inspired, early adapters, and influencers that just bought the Nike product to be cool and to influence and to be showing the world. So what Nike has capitalized on is this cultural inclusion where they're selling to 15 to 40-year-olds, but that are very sensitive to not just the sports side of it, but the whole vision and early adopter and influencer side of it. And it's something that is quite unique that has, I think, propelled them into this leadership position. I alluded to something like culturally relevant in the case study. They're always at the cusp of trying to figure out what the Gen Z and millennials are at in their heads and deliver that to them, whether it's a sports shoe or whether it's something that is more of an influential, piece of goods. So one other just point, and I'll again, we can bring it back to you. The Apple Vision Pro. I think that, and you know this better than I do, but I believe that Apple's already cutting some deals with whether it's the NBA or some of the other major sports leagues. And what's happening is this intersection of Nike in sports and Apple Vision Pro in sports. And that's why I'm so excited. And I think you've told us all Q1 2024 is when Apple's likely to launch their Vision Pro, which will give an entirely new experience to being in a game or in an event. And I think that you're going to see Nike and Apple actually somehow come together, collaborate in a way that will drive both of those companies to entirely new levels, or as Nike would say, to raise the bar.
Yeah, and I do think that from a competitive standpoint, it gives them quite an edge, and especially going into the next year. As you mentioned, Apple's already cut a fairly big deal with the NBA. I've been talking to executives from other sport areas, and as you know, Apple has become a major vehicle for American Soccer League. And you can imagine that they've done and doing some very fascinating things in soccer, or European football, as we would call it. And I think it's going to accelerate dramatically. But I want to go back to the point that I brought up earlier, and we've made this point almost on every podcast. But I don't think companies can sit back and just watch. I think that they have got to get in and, start a VR project, start learning about it. The most logical entry point tends to be from some of the things we brought up in past podcasts is in training, using VR for training. And I think that is an easier concept to digest. But beyond that, I think Nike's giving us a really good example of other ways to use VR that goes beyond just training, because in this particular case, they're dealing with customer interaction. They're bringing in the NFTs to create another revenue stream. I mean, I'll tell you, it's very visionary and somewhat complex in one sense, so that you can imagine that they've got a pretty good team behind this, pulling it together, as well as Knight and I'm sure other executives who have this visionary approach. And yes, they are more aggressive in this than most companies are today. But I don't know at this point you can sit back and just say, oh, the metaverse is coming, it'll be here somewhere. When you're seeing examples, as we've brought up over the years from Procter and Gamble and Pfizer and now Nike, who have been using it already, and they're giving, it gives them a cutting edge over the competition. And that cutting edge could be very, very big, to the point where it not only gives them an advantage, but it accelerates their position in their industries so that they become strong leaders, right?
Totally agree with you. If you go back, and one of the exciting things of this podcast series is we've really got some great podcasts, but if you go back to there's a good deal of maybe a dozen of them now, all of them are companies that have, as you have already alluded to, taken the step to put stakes in the ground, give it a try. I mean, the JP Morgan case study is amazing. And why they got into the metaverse, and it was just they wanted to put it to get a leadership position. They really didn't know how best to do it. Now they're doing some very interesting things in virtual real estate and so forth. But these companies have taken the risk, as Nike has, to get in the metaverse early, to put the stakes in the ground, learn, and become in sustainable leadership as they move forward. So again, I would encourage what you said. All companies need a virtual world strategy today and implement it over time, however they want to start.
Yeah. And we're seeing greater interest in that, especially because of what Apple's introduced with the Vision Pro. But there are other headsets that are actually being used too. The Meta Quest 3, which is really a huge advancement over the Metaverse 2, the Meta Pro 2 or Meta Quest 2. And I think what we're going to see is a very interesting year in 2024 when it comes to the metaverse in general, where more and more companies are going to say, we can't sit back anymore. We got to do something. And this is one of the areas that both you and I have been privileged to be able to help other companies with this exact strategy. Because when it really comes down to it, that younger generation, I believe, well, they are in the digital generation, they will eventually become a metaverse generation. And they're going to expect this kind of interaction, in the coming years.
We're on the same page.
All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining us and listening to our podcast today. We look forward to being with you again soon. For more information on this and other case studies, please check out the website www.ismguide.com and click the link for XR Metaverse Resource Center. We look forward to you joining us next time on another episode of Business Success in a Virtual World.